Elena Voss stood in front of the mirror and did not recognize the woman looking back at her. The white dress fit perfectly. Her hair was pinned exactly the way her mother used to wear hers. Everything was correct. Everything was in order. And yet, deep inside her chest, something felt hollow, like a room that had once been full of furniture and was now empty except for the echo. 5 years had passed since the ambush. 5 years since Daemon Cade, the Alpha King of the Northern Territories, had disappeared during the celebration that was supposed to bond them forever. She remembered the fire in the trees, the screaming, the sound of his voice calling her name before the smoke swallowed him whole. She remembered running until her lungs burned, searching until her feet bled, refusing to believe the search parties when they came back one by one with the same answer: no trace, no scent, no sign of him anywhere. For a year, she had waited by the window every night. For 2 years, she had visited the ruins of the ceremony site every month, hoping, praying, bargaining with a universe that did not seem to be listening. By the 3rd year, her father had grown sick. By the 4th, he was dying. And on the day he took her hand in his and asked her, with tears in his tired eyes, to secure the future of their pack before he passed, she understood that hope was a luxury she could no longer afford. Cassius Reyes was not a consolation prize. She wanted to be clear about that, even to herself. He was kind, he was steady, he had stood beside her family through every hard season, had guarded her father's failing body through his final months, had never once pushed her for more than she could give. When he asked her to marry him, he did not ask with the fire of a mate bond. He asked with the quiet devotion of a man who simply wanted to make her life easier. She had said yes because it was the responsible thing to do. She had said yes because the wolf inside her, the part of her that used to howl for Daemon in her sleep, had gone silent so many years ago that she assumed it was dead. She was wrong. On the other side of the world, in a fortress that did not appear on any map her people knew, a man who used to be a king had spent 5 years as a weapon. Daemon did not remember his own name for most of that time. A rogue witch, paid by an enemy kingdom that wanted the northern territories weakened, had wrapped his mind in a curse so thick that his memories drowned beneath it like stones in a river. He knew how to fight. He knew how to survive. He did not know why, some nights, his chest ached with a longing he could not name, or why the scent of wildflowers made his throat tighten with a grief he could not explain. The curse held, until the witch who cast it died of natural causes, unrelated to any rescue or rebellion, simply an old woman whose heart finally gave out. Curses tied to a caster's will often unravel when the caster is gone, and this one did, all at once, like a dam breaking. Daemon woke up on a stone floor with his own name in his mouth, and Elena's face burned into his memory so vividly that for a moment he thought she was standing in front of him. He ran. He did not stop for food. He barely stopped for water. He crossed 3 territories on paws that bled through the pads, driven by a single unbearable fear that 5 years was too long, that she might have moved on, that she might have grieved him and healed and built a life that no longer had room for a ghost. He told himself it did not matter. He told himself that even if she had a new life, he only needed to see her safe with his own eyes to finally rest. But his wolf did not believe the lie, and neither, if he was honest, did he. He crossed the border into the northern territories on the very day of her wedding. He did not know that yet. He only knew that the pack scent grew stronger with every mile, and that underneath it, faint but unmistakable, was her scent, the one thing that had never left him, even when his own name had. The ceremony took place in the garden behind the Foss family estate, beneath an arch of white flowers that Elena's mother had planted years ago for exactly this kind of occasion. The pack had gathered in neat rows of chairs. Cassius stood at the altar in a dark suit, his hands folded, his expression calm in the way that made people trust him. Elena walked down the aisle on the arm of her father's oldest friend, since her father was too weak to attend and had insisted, from his sickbed, that she go on without him and be happy. She kept her eyes forward, she kept her chin high. She told herself this was right, that Cassius deserved a wife who gave him her full attention, not a woman still listening for a howl that would never come again. The vows were simple and sincere. Cassius spoke of steadiness, of partnership, of building something lasting together. Elena spoke of gratitude, of respect, of choosing him with clear eyes and a whole heart, and she meant every word, even as some small buried part of her ached with the effort of meaning it. When the ring slid onto her finger, the pack erupted into cheers. Someone released a flock of white doves. Children ran between the chairs. It was by every outward measure a beautiful wedding. Damon arrived 4 minutes after the doves were released. He came through the tree line at a dead run, half-shifted, his clothes in tatters, his body screaming with exhaustion from days without proper rest. He had smelled the celebration from over a mile out, and had not let himself think about what kind of celebration it might be. He had only run faster. By the time he broke into the clearing, the guests had already scattered into smaller groups near the reception tables. The newlyweds, following pack tradition, had already slipped away through the garden's back path toward the guest house, where they were meant to begin the next chapter of their life together in private before returning for the evening feast. Damon stood in the middle of an empty ceremony space, chest heaving, and found nothing but folded chairs and the last drifting feathers from the doves. He would have left. He almost did, but something white caught the corner of his eye, snagged on a low branch at the edge of the property, fluttering gently in the evening breeze. It was her veil. Elena had removed it herself just before walking the garden path, wanting one quiet moment of fresh air on her face before stepping into her new life, not knowing that the wind would carry the delicate fabric off her hand and catch it in the branches behind her. Damon crossed the clearing and lifted it with hands that were shaking, not from exhaustion this time, but from something far more painful. He pressed the fabric to his face and breathed her in, and for the first time in 5 years of captivity, of forgetting, of fighting battles that were never his own, he allowed himself to weep. Elena felt it before she heard anything. She was halfway down the garden path, a few steps behind Cassius, when the mate bond in her chest, the one she had convinced herself was a scar over an empty space, suddenly flared to life with a violence that nearly buckled her knees. It was not a memory, it was not grief playing tricks on her, it was real, warm, unmistakably alive, and it was close. She stopped walking. Cassius, a few paces ahead, did not notice immediately. He was speaking softly about the arrangements for the evening feast, about how his mother had asked to give a toast, about small, ordinary things that belonged to the life they had just promised each other. Elena turned around. Through the gap in the hedges, across the emptied ceremony clearing, she saw him, her king, alive, thinner than she remembered, his clothes torn, his hair longer, kneeling in the dirt with her veil clutched in both hands, like it was the only solid thing left in the world. For a moment, she could not move. 5 years of grief, of forced healing, of convincing herself that the ache in her chest was something she had already survived, rose up all at once and threatened to knock her flat. She had built an entire life on the belief that he was gone. She had just spoken vows to another man believing, with absolute certainty, that this exact impossible sight would never happen. Elena. Cassius had finally noticed she'd stopped. He followed her gaze across the clearing and went very still. He was not a foolish man. He had loved Elena long enough and watched her closely enough to recognize immediately what he was looking at. He had heard the old stories about King Damon Cade, had attended the search parties in the early years, had privately believed, along with everyone else, that the Alpha King was dead. He understood, in the space of a single breath, exactly what this meant. Elena did not run to Damon. That was not who she was. Instead, she walked back toward Cassius first, because he deserved to hear the truth from her own mouth before anything else happened, because 5 years of his loyalty and kindness were not something she could simply set aside without a word. "They need to know what happened to him," she said quietly, her voice trembling but honest. "I am not asking your permission. I am telling you the truth, because you deserve that much from me." Cassius looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, his eyes shining with something between hurt and understanding. "I always knew," he said finally, "that if he ever came back, I would lose you. I told myself it would never happen. I suppose some part of me knew I was wrong to believe that." "You are not losing anything that was ever truly yours to lose," Elena said gently. "I care for you. I have never lied about that. But what I feel for him is not something I chose, and it never went away, even when I thought he was gone forever. Cassius nodded slowly, pain written plainly across his face, but no anger. Go, he said. Find out the truth. Whatever happens after that, we will face it honestly, all three of us. That is the least any of us deserve after today. Elena crossed the clearing at a run. Damon looked up when he heard her footsteps, and the sight of her in her wedding dress, running toward him instead of away, undid something in his chest that had been braced for the opposite. You're alive, she whispered, dropping to her knees in front of him, her hands framing his face as if she needed to prove to herself that he was solid and real. They told me you were dead. I searched for years. I never stopped believing. Not really, not underneath everything else. I don't remember most of it, Damon said, his voice raw. A curse took my memory. It only broke a few days ago. I ran the whole way here because some part of me knew, even without remembering your face clearly, that I needed to reach you before it was too late. You're too late for the wedding, Elena said, a broken, disbelieving laugh escaping her. But maybe not too late for everything. Damon closed his eyes, pressing his forehead gently against hers. I have no right to ask you for anything, he said. I arrived too late. You built a life. You made vows to someone else today, and that is not something I can simply erase because I finally came back. No, Elena agreed softly. It isn't that simple. There are people involved who deserve honesty and time, not a hasty undoing of everything in one afternoon. But I am not walking away from you again, Damon. Not when the bond between us is standing right here in front of me, alive and real. They stayed like that for a long moment, in the quiet ceremony clearing, surrounded by folded chairs and drifting feathers, while behind them, in the garden, Cassius watched from a distance with a heavy heart and a strange, unexpected sense of peace, knowing that whatever came next would at least be built on truth instead of secrets. The wedding day did not end the way anyone had planned it, but for the first time in 5 long years, Elena felt something settle inside her chest that was not grief, and not duty, but a fragile, hopeful kind of relief, the feeling of finally being found by someone she had never truly stopped waiting for, even in the moments she believed she had let him go.